Is it law of attraction or law of consciousness? Hi everyone, and welcome to my channel. I wanted to start by talking about the difference between these two because I think nuances are important, and they do make a difference when applying the law. Most people that teach the law, they call it the law of attraction. But a while ago, I realized I should be calling it the law of consciousness. So why do I call it the law of consciousness? When people teach the law of attraction, they usually say, if you imagine having something you want, eventually you will get it. But that simple explanation is not enough. Otherwise, everyone will be manifesting everything they want. And we know that's not the case. So what's lacking? What are we missing here? When you tell people that you have been imagining your fulfilled desire, but you still haven't manifested what you wanted yet, usually they tend to tell you, well, you're not just imagining it hard enough or long enough, or basically, you don't really believe what you're imagining. You need to make it more real. And that's the problem for most people. How to believe that is real. This is why calling it the law of attraction, at least for me, is misleading. Why? Because it implies that you attract things as a magnet. Therefore, things come from out there, simply because I imagine them repeatedly. Is that the case? Well, in a life-changing desire, usually is not. Let me explain. We are a conglomeration of many states of consciousness, or what I rather call programming. What you call you, your name, your identity, when you're in the surface of things, is just a set of programs that became your personality. You can be rich, poor, intellectual, artistic, healthy, sick, etc. But you're a combination of those states. You can be rich and stupid, or poor but intelligent, like Neville once said. My point is, if the thing you desire is the opposite of what you perceive yourself to be, no matter how many times you try to imagine it, it will escape your grasping. A typical example would be wealth. Let's say you want a Porsche, a fancy car, right? A law of attraction teacher usually would tell you, imagine day in and day out that car will be yours. And so you do that. Now let's say you have always been poor, always struggling to get money for rent or food, etc. These are opposite frequencies. The state you created for yourself would never match the frequency of what that car implies or represents. A Porsche in this planet implies the frequency of extreme wealth. But if you have struggled throughout your life, if you had never even had $1,000 at once just for you to spend freely, how can you ever perceive what it's like to be the owner of that Porsche? Porsche, is it? Don't remember. Well, you might as well try to imagine what it is to be a Martian anyways, because it's so out of your reach from the state you are right now, since your nature is the opposite extreme of your desire. So attraction would mean you are a magnet to whatever you want, no matter the nature of the consciousness you are expressing right now. But you're not a magnet. You're something bigger than that. You're an infinite consciousness. The thing is, the law of consciousness requires one thing from us while we are in the flesh, to become the psychological nature of a state. While we live on this planet, we have to express the nature of different psychological states of consciousness. So the law tells us, yes, you can have whatever you want, but can you learn to absorb the nature of what you want to become? So if I want that Porsche, by implying that I am a magnet that attracts, that statement on its own is incomplete, and therefore I will probably fail due to lack of a deeper understanding of how it works. Because the nature of wealth only attracts such objects of wealth, and that Porsche is such an object. That is why I can't imagine being the owner of a Porsche while my nature is always of lacking, struggling, suffering, complete enslavement of my limitations, etc. Frequencies that oppose each other can never be a match. And this is why when I say the law of consciousness and people ask me, why do you call it that? I explain to them that this way you can understand better the fact that as long as consciousness is experimenting in a form, it will always need to become the nature of a psychological idea. You're not a magnet and you don't attract things per se. You become the nature of a psychological state, and as a consequence, the physical reality matches the frequency of your state. And this is the big difference. The things we manifest are results. They are the results of a state of consciousness. The attraction idea is faulty and misleading. We need to understand that we are just expressing the nature of a character we create on this planet. It feels easier to perceive that. Neville Goddard said the following: "It is the height of folly to expect changes to come about by the mere passage of time. For that which requires a state of consciousness to produce its effect could not be effective without such a state of consciousness. So if I must be in the consciousness of the thing that I am seeking before I find it, then the only thing to do is to acquire that state of consciousness." Neville also says, "First of all, man stands forever in the presence of an infinite and eternal energy, from which energy all things proceed, but it follows definite patterns. It just doesn't move out of man and crystallize in things in some strange random manner. It follows a definite track, and the track it follows is laid down by the man himself in his own internal conversations." And actually beliefs, but we're not gonna get into that. If I want to be able to do that, I need to first get to know the nature of what I want to become. So, how does it feel like? After all, energy is perceived as a certain structure of information. Therefore, you have to learn to become, in nature, the person you want to be. Usually the problem is, most of us forgot how to play parts, and our imagination needs to be enriched. Try to find a nature that you would like to express. Forget about attracting things. And this is not a law that requires effort. See in chapter 14 of The Power of Awareness. It's called The Effortless Way. And it says, your journey from one state of consciousness to another is a psychological one. So to make a journey, you must employ the psychological equivalent of least action, and the psychological equivalent is mere assumption. He also states, it works by means of attention minus effort. Since our imagination gets blocked, limited, contrived, and basically programmed by the time we're adults, we might be a bit handicapped when it comes to perceiving our imaginative state. Usually we have a vague idea of what we want to be, but I've noticed when talking to my clients, they never really quite go deep into the characteristics of the state, not only as the idea, but also how it feels to be that specific state in all its nature. So in many cases, imagination needs to get stimulated. It needs to perceive things in a way we have never felt before. We need to explore that new life from every angle. What new freedoms can you perceive from that new state of consciousness? What would be a normal, random day in that new life? How would you feel if you're used to being that person? And so on. Well, of course, we could continue talking about this for days and weeks. But I wanted to start with this. For now, I hope you get started in a new chapter of your life, knowing you don't need to attract anything. Knowing you don't need to attract what you already have. If you could only perceive that you are already what you're looking for.